Hey everybody, welcome to Technically Unraveled. I am Kristen Fehrenbach, the Senior Director of Microsoft Go-to-Market here at PackState. Thanks so much for tuning in today, or if you're watching on demand. I will say, please like, share, subscribe, because we've got a lot of content coming your way, not only from Technically Unraveled, but you've got the Game and Academy Live as well. All right, we've got a lot of stuff to cover today, which I'm pretty excited about. So to kick us off, we're going to talk about essential cybersecurity standards. So there's a lot going on in cybersecurity. I feel like it's definitely that hot topic right now, but let's just kind of break it down and what are those essentials that we need to be really focusing on. We're also going to be talking about who should be the ones talking about cybersecurity risks. Should it be me? Maybe somebody over here? I don't know. We're going to see who should be having that conversation in each business. We're going to talk about key insights for cybersecurity insurance. And of course, it wouldn't be a Technically Unraveled unless we talked about Microsoft Copilot, that opportunity. How does that roll in with cybersecurity? But before we introduce our guest, got a quick video about him. Let's check it out.
Meet David Powell, VP of Sales Strategy at PackState. By day, he's your typical sales strategist. But by night, he's Agent 8, the secret weapon of the tech world.
Operation successful.
With his charm and charisma, Agent 8 can secure any deal, outwit any competitor, and still make it home in time for dinner.
The cavalry has arrived.
Sweet. Hey, you got to go see David Powell. You have to go see his session, and we're really glad we did.
Aye, aye, sir. Transmission received.
He really broke it down for how we can sell cybersecurity in 5 different steps, and to sell not the vendor, but sell the solution instead.
David Powell, VP of Sales Strategy at PackState. Sales strategist by day, secret agent by night. Because when it comes to sales, he doesn't just play the game, he rewrites the rules.
Mission completed.
Agent 8 on the case. David, thanks for joining us today.
I guess I always wanted like an international man of mystery reel, and PackState Studios has made all my dreams come true. So that's outstanding.
I love it. David, tell us who you are. What do you do here at PackState besides being Agent 8? And maybe a fun fact?
Yeah, so David Powell, I'm the Vice President of Sales Strategy here, but let's be real, that really doesn't mean that much. That I think was the open head count that they had when they hired me. My primary role has been to help our partners sell cybersecurity to their end users. So really kind of like cybersecurity go-to-market for our partners is what I've been focused on since I've been here. And I joined in April a year ago. So I'm like, right at almost coming up on a year and a half. So it's been a great ride so far. And let's see, my fun fact, while the Olympics are going on, in 2016, I got to go to the Rio Olympics with one of our vendors, and they put us up on this boat, which was really kind of like a high-end cruise ship. It only had like 250 rooms. And we were on there, 30 people from the vendor, and then NBA basketball. So all the USA basketball players were on there. So we were eating breakfast with like Carmelo was sitting next to us, like, in the classic picture it didn't happen world, like here's me and Kevin Durant.
Yep.
On the
No, pull that back up. How tall are you next to him? Let's see this. Come on, David.
He's taller than you, Kristen. He's 7 feet tall and I'm 6 feet tall. And that was also probably about like 20 pounds ago for Dave as well. But yeah, so I like to joke that me and KD are besties. But yeah, so we got to see Usain Bolt run. We got to see the gold medal beach volleyball match, and then we stayed on the boat with NBA basketball. So it was a good time.
That is awesome and relevant for the time that it is right now. David, you've been out in the field a lot, so I'm glad that you were able to make some time to come on. I super appreciate it. But you're in partners' offices, they come and see momentum, they do all these different things. So you get to spend a lot of time with partners. And just to kind of start us out, I'm just curious, what messages are currently really landing with partners really well right now?
Yeah, so the message that really seems to be landing with partners is this idea of like, what is the minimum amount of cybersecurity? And the way that I'm helping them think about it is this idea of like seatbelts and airbags. So if you have a super fancy car, Kristen, it's going to have, I know you have a Forerunner, so it doesn't have probably collision avoidance and lane keeping assist. It may, but every car has seatbelts and airbags. And so when you kind of think that through, it's like, so what is like the minimum standard that people tend to need for cybersecurity? And I've gone out and talked to a bunch of cybersecurity insurance companies, and they're really kind of driving a lot of consumption in the small to medium business. And so, cybersecurity insurance, I talked to them and said, okay, what's the minimum standard? Like, what's the seatbelts and airbags that everyone needs? And the answer to that question is really like these five things. And um, given that context to partners around here's the way to talk about it around seatbelts and airbags and this minimum standard is really helpful in that most people get the idea that if they're even going to run to the store around the corner, right, they're going to put their seatbelts on. And that is just the normal thing that you do to protect yourself when you're in the car. And by the way, seatbelts don't prevent you having car accidents, nor do airbags, but they make you safer when you do. And I think that really kind of aligns to the story of cybersecurity as well, is that a lot of the tools that you have, they can't necessarily keep the bad guys out. We're in an assumed breach model where we assume that the bad guys are going to get in. So, given that case, what can we do to lessen the impact when the bad thing does happen? And that's really a message that's really seemed to land with the partners. And then that's a terminology they can use to take it to their end users and explain to them what those minimum standards look like.
I really like that we're able to come up with these analogies because sometimes, David, people get really deep down into the tech and then they're talking
Do we
about,
know
okay,
anybody
well,
like that, Kristen?
IPMG, man, sometimes it's just like, I'm like, okay, well, but I get these words individually, but what does the sentence mean? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So I really like being able to arm the partners with something they can actually go out and it'll actually resonate and it makes sense to everybody. David, my Forerunner doesn't even have automatic lights. That is where I'm at, but it does have seat belts. So I really
that's
like that.
that's
So,
true.
okay. So, what is the minimum standard that they require? I really like that. Hey, you know what? We're really being able to give partners that way to go and have that conversation in a way that will make sense to everybody. But I think something that we talked about during Beyond actually was having the right people in the right room. And I think that that's really been landing with some of these partners as well. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so real quick, just to back up, because just to make sure we reiterate, the five things that the seatbelts and airbags are: advanced threat protection, EDR, MFA, security awareness training, segregated backups. So if you say what's the minimum standard, those are the seatbelts and airbags. But the conversation piece is, Kristen, this is, technical people want to fall back to where they're comfortable, and so they typically want to talk about technology. So the example that I would use on this is, if you were the CEO of a law firm, a COO of a law firm, maybe it's 100 users, and I'm calling on you, and I'm like, hey, Kristen, you do not want to build an IT team. By the way, you wouldn't even know how to create the job description if you did want to create your own IT team. If you hire two people, they're going to know this amount of stuff. They're going to take vacations. They're going to quit for more money somewhere else. They're hard to manage, all that kind of stuff. Or you just give it to me, Chris, and I'll be your MSP. I'll do all the technology for you. And my collective team knows like all the things, right? They know all the stuff. And when they take vacation, we have support desks around that can cover those tickets and all this kind of stuff. So why don't you just give that to us, kind of like outsource your tech to us? And you're like, David, that sounds like an awesome idea. Sounds like a great idea. So you give it over to me. Then you're like, but you know what, David? I don't want to talk about this stuff all the time. So there's this guy on our team, Steven, and Steven's kind of nerdy. He knows all of our applications and he helps the lawyers with their applications and their phones and that kind of stuff. Can you do all of your meetings with Steven? Talk to Steven. I'm like, sure. So I go and talk to
Mhm.
Steven. I'll do all my QPRs with Steven. Steven and I get along great. We can nerd out on certain things. Then one day I come in and like, hey, Steven, here's what cybersecurity risk looks like. Here's where it's a problem. Here's where it's a challenge. Here's what you would have to do if you had an incident with breach notification letters and all this kind of stuff. You need to do these five things around cybersecurity. And Steven sits there and he's like, you know what? I got a lot of other
That's a lot of
projects.
work.
Yeah, my partners aren't going to want to fool with that. So he says no, right? Well, he just made a risk decision for the law firm that he's not paid to make, equipped to make, smart enough to make, empowered to make any of those things. That's your job. You're the COO. And so if there's a breach, Kristen's going to be the one, that has the open for work thing on her LinkedIn profile when they fire you, for putting the law firm in a bad scenario. Steven's just a techie guy. And so when I had that conversation with partners, what they realize is, oh man, we're talking to the wrong people, right? We're talking to the technical people because we're comfortable instead of talking to the business people about risk. And so that's that whole thing. Are you having the right conversation with the right people about the right things? And most of the time, partners, when I'm having that piece, they kind of like, oh, we're doing this wrong. And so they realize that they need to reposition who they're talking to.
I really like that, because if you're just growing comfortable with somebody, right? Like, you've got to get to know them, right? And all of a sudden you're really driving, you're having a good time, everybody's on the same page. And you're like, hey, you know what? I want to bring this up. And then it might not even dawn on people that this isn't the conversation that they should be having with this person. So to always keep in mind. And I mean,
Yeah.
what would you recommend for really finding out who would be the right person for each conversation? Like, is this maybe something that they partners should go in and say, like, based on these scenarios, who should I talk to? Like, what is your recommendation there?
I think they need to be taught. So it's a great question. I think that they need to be talking to the business person, whoever kind of made the decision to start with, right? Because somebody made the business decision to say, I don't want to build my own IT team. I want to outsource this to an MSP partner. So whoever made that decision is the person that needs to be deciding potentially about risk. They may say, actually, that's somebody else's job, but that's where you need to start. And we tend to fall down to where we feel comfortable. So we want to have that tech conversation with tech people. And it's not as comfortable typically for a lot of these MSP business owners or sellers that are a lot more comfortable with speeds and feeds to then go and have this risk based conversation with business interest. But again, what you've got to do is you have to educate them first, let them understand what their risk is, and then make them decide, is this an acceptable amount of risk? And, lots of people, they assume they don't have much risk. So once you educate them, you want them to decide, yes, this is acceptable or not acceptable. But the technical person you're talking to is probably not the person to make that call.
I like it. And so in your Agent 8 opening, somebody actually talked about the 5 things. So tell me about the 5 things one more time, because I want to make sure we're really hitting on these.
Yeah, so the 5 things, the seatbelts and airbags of cybersecurity. Again, this is the minimum standard. Do some people need more? Do some people need collision avoidance and lane keeping assist? Yes, right? But everybody needs these 5 things, because you can't go out and buy a car that has all the fancy stuff that doesn't have seatbelts and airbags, right? So the 5 things: advanced threat protection. Got to protect your email, because that's where most of the bad actors start with all those phishing emails and all kind of stuff. Second is going to be MFA. Microsoft says only 30% of people have MFA enabled. CIS, which is the White House Center of Internet Security, says only 32% of people have MFA turned on. That is like the easiest thing. When I was talking to one of these cybersecurity
It's
insurance
so
companies,
scary.
oh, isn't it scary? 70% of people don't. When you talk to when I talked to one of these insurance companies, they said that their underwriting platform has 14 wheels at the bottom that all need to turn green when you enter your responses to the questionnaire. And when you click MFA, 12 of the 14 turn green. So MFA makes that much of a difference, which is crazy. Then EDR, endpoint detection and response. Then segregated backups. You want backups. You want to back up as much data as granular as you can, PC, servers, applications, and put it as many different places as you can. And then security awareness training is you got to make sure your users are trained, because at the center of most cybersecurity incidents is a user that kind of screwed something up.
You mean somebody who clicks on an email and isn't sure because, like, the A might look different?
Yeah. Or give it out over the phone. It's like we used
Yeah.
to do some
John
penetration
Street
testing.
said to buy
Right.
$3,000 in gift cards.
I know. And now what am I gonna do with all these gift cards, right? And so
Yep.
that's the hard thing, is getting people to kind of realize that, you know, culture of questioning is another thing I always talk about is, no one should be afraid to pick up the phone and say, "Hey, Kristen," if I'm the controller and you're the CFO, pick up the phone and say, "Hey, Kristen, did you really want me to wire this money somewhere?" And that you need to be able to be like, deep breath, "Yes, David, that was legitimate." But if you like berate me and yell at me, then all you've done is reinforce that I shouldn't question. And then I'm more susceptible to wiring the money when the bad guys ask for it later illegitimately. So culture of questioning is something that I always talk about with their partners to their end users. It's like people should question, people should ask, is this legitimate? Is this really what I should be doing? If somebody calls you and says, I need you to give me your, password or whatever, don't do that. Call back in. Can I get through the switchboard to you and all kind of stuff? So you should always confirm, trust and verify.
Absolutely. And I like the culture of questions. It's funny as I had somebody call me, they claimed they were from my bank. And I was like, okay, that sounds good. So I hung up and I
Hmm.
called the number on the back of my card. And it turns out like it was legitimate, but who's going to just call me? So I was like, hey, you know what? Let me just, not trust, but I'm still going to verify. So I really like the culture of questions because it really just overall let's make sure that everything checks and balances. But us
Yeah,
at
and it
Pax 8,
doesn't
we
cost
might be
anything.
living. Oh, exactly. That's what I'm saying. I'm like, always ask. So
Yeah.
we live the Copilot dream at Pax 8, David. All got these licenses. I don't know about you, but I am in there all day, every day, asking questions like, I can't find this file. What is this? Asking all these questions. Here we go. But what are you hearing in the market right now about Copilot and AI?
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that there is work. So Copilot's cool. We'll talk more about that. I know, but I think the thing that I'm hearing is that there's work to be done to appreciate the coolness, right? Is that a lot of people haven't really thought through when they turn it loose on their own data, what does that actually mean? Does everybody, do we have the right role based access controls? Do we have the right structure around all of that? And I think that when you begin to talk to people, a lot of folks just has that, particularly in high growth companies, haven't ever really kind of gone back and done user access audits. So, like an example of that we used to see a lot would be, Kristen's employee number 6 at the company. When she was employee 6, she had access to the S drive. Now we have 600 employees, but Kristen still has access to the S drive, right? No one ever, and now all the company goodies are in the S drive. So no one ever went back and kind of like reined in, your access. And so that's one of those, that's an example. Do you have files that are really should be very protected, but somebody downloaded and put in a public place that no one would ever find otherwise? But if you train the data on it, it could surface that information. So I just think that a lot of people, there's some things you have to do to kind of housekeeping, if you will, around your data and around your permissions and around your role-based access controls before you can really benefit from the full potential of Copilot in your organization.
And I think that
Yeah.
this slide is a really good point because, like, for instance, like us at Pax 8, we are consistently just questioning who's data what, how are you able to gain access? Like, for instance, some of my access was taken away from a certain thing that I consistently use. So I had to go back in and put in a ticket, right? I got the access back super quick, no big deal. We're good to go. But what happens? Like, is this conversation landing well with partners where they're able to have this conversation? Or is the end customer just like, oh, nope, that's too much work. The employees are going to freak out about having to put in a ticket? Like, or is it about the culture? Like, is that landing? Or is people just kind of upset about, man, I got to put in that ServiceNow ticket and that's just a pain?
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
people hate people hate having their permissions revoked from things, right? And by the way, Kristen, if your badge ever stops working, we have something to tell you. But the whole idea of like, I used to have access to this and now I don't get to have access to this anymore. Well, no,
Hmm.
because our security controls have changed. And I think that is going to become more granular as we go, just because the days of kind of everybody being an admin, everybody being able to load their own applications that they want, everybody kind of do what they want, those are gone. Right now, we need to control, as the slide said, who has access to what and what do they have access to now, and is that correct or accurate, or has that been thought through, or is that more like accidental permissions as a result of how long they've been here or something like that?
No, and I totally agree. That totally happened. So that's why I was kind of curious because I like what you said in the beginning about being able to ask those questions. And I think it's all about the culture that maybe the end customers are really providing, because if they're able to ask questions and they're really enabling the customers and training them on some of these different risks and the risks associated, maybe the end
Mhm.
employees will be a little bit more understanding as well.
That is correct.
I like it. So, Copilot stories out in the field. I know you've got a good one for me. Come on.
I do. I do. So, this friend of mine in the industry, and I will protect his name and protect the company he's working for. But he was speaking at something, and it's a big conference. There's several hundred people out in the audience, and he's up front, and he's showing the cool stuff with Copilot and showing all the different things you can do with Copilot. And then he's like, "Does anybody have a question?" All these people raise their hand, right? And they're like, "Yeah, I got a question. I got a question. I have a question." And they were excited about the capabilities of Copilot. But this one guy raises his hand and he calls on him and he says, "Ask Copilot how much the CEO of your business makes." He's like, "Oh no." So they've
He's
done all
like,
the
no,
work.
not that question.
That question, you're right. Any other questions? But they had done the work that we just talked about, right? Around role-based access control and permissions and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
But all of a sudden he's like, "Were we thorough enough?" or whatever. So he goes into Copilot and he's got his computer hooked to the big screen. So it's on the screens behind him and he types in, "How much does insert
Stress
CEO
is
name here?"
rising.
Yes, make. And then he said that he hit enter, but he put his hand on the HDMI cord because if it returned the result, he was going to like snatch it out, right? So he hits enter and he goes, it was like milliseconds, but it seemed like hours, before it returned it. And the result Copilot returned, it says, "This company is a privately held company and does not disclose, compensation." And he was like, "Whew." But then wisely, he turned that back around to the audience and said, "How many of you guys would be willing to do that up front, or would you be scared about what it would return?" And all are like, "Yeah, And so it's just a good reminder that even though they had done the work, so to speak, that he was still kind of nervous about it, right? And so how the work has to be done, and then it needs to really be kind of tested and validated. Hopefully, not on stage in front of 100 something people. So.
All right. Well, then, who did you ask Copilot for their salary at PAX 8?
Well, I basically asked Copilot, how can we replace Kristen Fehrenbach with Copilot? And its answer was like super easy. So, we'll have a little meeting next week. If you bring a box with your personal effects, that'd be great. No.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
When my computer just doesn't log in magically, it's not my
yeah,
role-based permissions.
that's right.
Different Copilot is now taken over. Got it.
That's right. You will not be able to put in a ticket to get that fixed. Um, so,
Oh my
besides
gosh.
asking it how we can replace Kristen, the part of a prompt that I like is I like asking it to explain certain things, and then the little piece I'll put at the end of the prompt is explain it to me like I'm in high school, right? And so it gives you a much more easy to understand explanation. So the other day I was doing some research on a particular category of cybersecurity, and I was trying to understand the difference in like this space and this space. And so I asked Copilot to explain the difference between these two spaces, and explain it to me like I'm in fifth grade or something like that. And it spit it out in very easy to understand, not a lot of jargon, heavy stuff. So that little phrase at the end of a prompt, explain this to me like I'm in high school, or explain this to me like I'm a computer science major or something. All that's going to give you different answers, and I think that helps me for readability and accessibility.
Oh, I really like that. All right. See, we learn something new every day.
Yeah.
So, David, we've got a lot going on with you at all these different events. You're really involved, and I love it. All of these conversations that you're having, though, like how much of it is driven by cybersecurity insurance?
Yeah, it's important to have a boogeyman, I think, sometimes in the sales process, and cybersecurity insurance is providing that role. Is that um, it is early days of business. Everyone needed to have general liability insurance. Then they came along and added errors and omissions, and now it really is almost becoming a thing where you're supposed to have cybersecurity insurance right behind it. So you can't go out there without GL and E&O, and now you're going to have to add cybersecurity insurance. So what's happening with that then is these people are going and getting cybersecurity insurance, and cybersecurity insurance is the insurance provider's response is here's this questionnaire of all this stuff. Do you do these things? And then the end users are turning to the MSPs and like, do I do these things? And the MSP then is saying like, well, not all of them, and so it's giving them the opportunity to create demand to meet these expectations of cybersecurity insurance. So cybersecurity insurance is kind of the bad guy, the boogeyman, saying you got to do these things, and that is driving consumption with the end users, which is then driving consumption from the MSP.
I like it. And so we do focus really heavily on SMB. So in SMB, what are some of the common cybersecurity attack scenarios, unfortunately, that you have seen or are seeing?
Yeah, it's it is unfortunately the dumb user thing. It's somebody clicking something they shouldn't, downloading something they shouldn't. But I think Kristen, what you see talking to them is like I think it'd be easier to sit back and say they're doing really risky things. They're on the dark web trying to download, Wolverine and Deadpool is currently showing in theaters. Like doing something like that, and it's really not that. The stories that I see all the time is like somebody tried to download an invoice and it was a fake invoice and it says, do you want to enable macros to view this invoice? And they say yes, and there was the malicious payload. Or I see somebody that got a QuickBooks file and they're at a bank and they're trying to open it and it won't open, so they go online and find a file converter to download to convert this file, but the file converter is not actually a file converter, it's a malicious payload. Or you see people that go out online and buy these cheap web-enabled thermostats from China that have open holes to the internet, so people can come in through those and get to the rest of your stuff. I mean, and the message that I always have to the partners is we would like to think that it's the scary people doing scary stuff in your network, but it's really normal people doing normal business things. They just, they get tricked, which is that whole thing of being culture questioning and extra vigilant around don't click that, don't respond to that text, don't go buy $5,000 worth of Amazon gift cards for the boss, all those types of things.
I like it. Okay. Well, I mean, it's good to know. And I mean, I think a lot of it's going to come down to enablement training. How are we making sure that we have that culture of questioning that we talked about? But, we talked a little bit about Copilot. So I went in and you put somebody on the spot during Beyond Live and you asked them questions. And so I came up with a few. You're into geography. So I went into
Yes.
Copilot and I said, I have somebody on an interview that I want to do some quick, fast trivia with. So let's see what Copilot returned. Now,
Okay.
David, you ready for it? We just got a couple.
Yes.
We'll get through them quick. I'm confident in
Okay.
you.
Okay.
What desert is the largest in the world?
Sahara.
Yeah. What U.S.
Okay.
state is home to no documented poisonous snakes?
Hawaii.
Alaska. If it was Hawaii, I'd be moving. I know.
I didn't think Alaska. I didn't think Hawaii had any snakes at all. But guess I was wrong. Okay. What else?
Hey, I don't know. We'll double check Copilot later, maybe. I don't know.
Oh, it's okay.
We'll see. And then, what is the smallest continent by land area?
Australia.
Bam! Last one.
It's a country and a continent and an island
All in one.
together.
See?
All
Last one for all the points. What is Ludacris's real name?
Christopher.
You drive on it
his last name right
over
now.
the water.
What is it?
Chris Bridges.
Yes.
Yep, you had
all
it.
I could
You
think of
were
was
right
Christopher.
there.
All I could think of was Christopher Wallace, which was Notorious B.I.G.
I love it. David, thank you so much. This time has been super, super helpful. We've had you on the show before. I think we should keep having you on the show, though. So maybe more to come.
Oh, should we? Should we?
We'll see. Then you can't really
More
escape it
news.
all. David, thank you so much for your time. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.
All right, everybody. That is a wrap on another session of Technically Unraveled. Oh, we tried to get rid of him. Then we brought him back. We don't know. He wants to stay. See? David wants to stay with us. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I am super excited next week to talk to Marissa. We are going to be talking about a partner to partner transfer tool that Microsoft has come out with. Make sure you don't miss it. We'll see you there.